All right, so real quick, I'm going to make a video about the use of bands and chains in the training. So more specifically, using them as accommodating resistance. I'm going to explain how we use them, why we use them, and just kind of go over that because I get a lot of questions about that. And if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see a lot of our guys using more so bands than chains, but they are similar. There's a couple of small differences between the two, but accommodating resistance basically meaning the resistance of the band or the chain works with your strength curve. So, for example, when you're deadlifting this weight right here, at the bottom of the deadlift, the bands aren't as tight, and as you come up through the lift, and as you get stronger, the bands become more. They add more tension to the bar. So, the bottom would be your weak point typically, where your body has the least amount of leverage at the bottom of the lift. So the bottom of the squat, the bottom of the deadlift, the bottom of the bench press, basically any movement, the bottom of the lift, your body is going to be at its weakest point. It's going to have the least amount of leverage. So the band tension is at its lightest, or the chains, same thing, because the chains will come down to the ground and coil onto the ground, and then you won't have as much chain weight on the bar. And as you lift it, the bands stretch or the chains come up off the ground. And as you're lifting through the range of motion of the lift, as you're standing up into this deadlift, the chains and the bands start to kick in more, and you're getting more resistance. Now, that does a few different things for us. So, one, it's working with your strength curve. Two, it's allowing the athlete or whoever's lifting the bar to really accelerate the barbell. So, if you ever lifted, those of you who've done some lifting, you know that like if you at the top of a lift, like if you're doing a press at the top of the lift, if you keep accelerating the weight, basically it's going to pull you can't, because it's going to pull your joints out, right? So what you're going to do is, with the bands, you could keep accelerating because the tension keeps growing. So you could really accelerate the weight. So it works basically acceleration. And then I'll explain to you in a minute how we actually use them, but that's why we use them. But I'll explain to you the percentages and stuff like that. So most of the time when we use these bands, we're using them on speed day. So we're using them with a percentage of our max and then adding a percentage of band tension. And the band tension can be changed. Different bands have different tensions, obviously. So a typical speed strength day would be like 50, 55, or 60% on the bar, plus 25 to maybe 30, 35% in band tension. Right? So at the top, you're averaging 75, 80, 85%. Now, and then we'll do 24 reps or so. And then what we'll do is, if we wanted to build strength speed, like a slower type of strength, we'll increase the barbell weight, or you could actually increase the band. You could do either really with that. So you could increase you could increase band tension. You can go like you could reverse that and do like 65% band tension, 25% barbell weight. So at the top, you're going to have a really strong, but at the bottom, you're not getting as much resistance. Okay? And if you want to do explosive strength, you would bring the number down to like 30% barbell weight, 25% band tension. And now at the top, you're at 55% or so, right? So we would do 1 week of 30, 1 week of 35, 1 week of 40. And that makes the bar move fast enough. If you've ever seen, I've done videos in the past on the force velocity curve and how there's different points along that curve that you need to train. So you basically have speed, explosive strength, speed strength, strength speed, absolute strength. So you need to really be training all those depending on where your weaknesses are. So not to get too complicated right now, but that's basically how we use the bands. We usually use them on speed day. Now you could just use bands on a max effort day to overload with that. Depending upon if you have a sticking point somewhere, you could throw a band in to help get through that sticking point. But that's basically how we use the bands and the chains. So it's really for accommodating resistance. Now, the bands will also, the difference between the band and the chain is the bands you're going to be able to like accelerate a little bit harder with them. The chains they bounce a little bit. They add a little bit more like maybe instability to them, even though they should be touching the floor a little bit, even at the top at all times. And then the bands are also going to accelerate the eccentric part of the lift. So for every action, there's equal opposite reaction, right? So if it's gonna pull you down faster, you're gonna have more kinetic energy to reverse yourself back up faster. Okay, so Like it wouldn't really matter so much in a deadlift unless you were going down fast. But like in squats, we would be able to now come down fast and then pause up fast, right? You would have more stored kinetic energy because you came down faster, right? It works just like your tendons would work, like your Achilles tendon would work and your ankle and stuff like that. So, and definitely in the bench press, you could do the same thing. You could do this stuff with overhead presses. You could use it with cleans. We don't do a lot of cleans. We don't do a ton of overhead press with the barbells, but you could use it with that stuff. You could add it for jumping too, so you could do barbell jumps. So basically any exercise you do, you could have a max, and you could use percentages with bands and chains. So for the deadlift here, obviously all these bands have different percentages. This band is actually, these green bands are actually 220 at the top. So if I was going to deadlift, I would focus on really accelerating the bar through the top. Now, if you didn't have the band on the bar, you would come up to the top and you would actually have to slow your body down. But because the band is on the bar, it's really cool that you don't have to slow down and you can really work on acceleration. And the same thing with the squats. Now, the squats we can get... The squats, we could work on coming down faster as well. So these red bands are 100 pounds total. So you can come down and accelerate up. Now if I wanted to come down fast, boom, boom, you would have more stored energy to go back up. Much like trying to jump as high as you can. Now over here on the bench, I've put chains on this because we did chain bench this week, actually for a max out. But it works the same. So as the bar comes down, you'll see the chains will come down to they're set so that they come down to the floor. As I come down, the chain, most of it goes onto the floor, and then as I come up, it gets harder, it gets heavier because the chain's coming off the floor. Same type of principle, except you don't have the elasticity component to the chains. And that's basically how we use those. We use them a lot, like I said, mostly on speed days or dynamic effort day. Not so much on max effort, but we will use it on max effort too sometimes. It just depends on our cycle and stuff like that. But that's basically how you use them. It's another tool, and it's really something that, you know, if I were, personally, I wouldn't be able to really train as effectively without them at this point. We don't really use them with our athletes until, we don't start using them until, they're like, for a deadlift, I like to see at least, 225 to 300 pound deadlift. Same thing with squat. Their numbers have to be pretty good to get something out of the chain. A lot of kids just need to get stronger, basic strength first, and then you can start to add that type of stuff. But it definitely will make them stronger and make them faster, more explosive, which is really what we're trying to get out of it. So that's about it. Yeah, so one other thing with our younger kids, our kids are just new to lifting and whatnot. We'll do our speed days, we'll just take the chains away a lot of times. So instead of doing 50 plus 25% band tension, we'll just do 75%, 80%, 85%. We always do waves, so we always wave up and then come back down. Wave up, come back down, wave up, come back down. That allows us to kind of, we're calling natural deloads, natural cycles with that. So we might go 70, 75, 80, and then take a different exercise and do it again. 70, 75, or 75, 80, 85, 75, 80, 85, until they get strong enough to where we see they're going to get some use out of the bands. Then we'll start using the bands. And that's it.